Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I'm just out here finishing straightening up the walls. This one was a little bit squirrely, so I put a string on it. See if I can't get that a little bit better. One thing always to remember, if you pull a joist or a brace or anything that has a nail in it, pull the nail so nobody ends up stepping on that nail. Don't bend the nail over, because then somebody else has to come later and pull the nail out. Just pull it out right when it's done and this piece of lumber is ready to be used again, and it's not a hazard. Stepping on nails is, if you've never done it, you don't want to do it. Well, all the walls in the building are now straightened. All the interior walls have been leveled and checked and braced, and now it's time to lay out for the roof trusses. And this is another thing you have to kind of think ahead on, because you want your plywood to, plywood is 8 foot long, so you want it to hit on a truss just like we did with the floor. Now, the thing to think about with this is there's going to be an overhang on it. We're not talking about the side overhangs, which I think this one will be, I don't know if I'm going to do 18 or 24 inches, I'm not sure yet. But I'm talking about on your gable end or your rake. Unless you have a flush rake, you're going to have an overhang. Normally it's 12 inches, that's what I'm going to do here on this one. But the wall itself has sheathing on the outside of it. So we're going to pretend this is the wall, since I can't bring the camera up on top of the wall. So this is our exterior wall. It has sheathing on it here. It also has sheathing here, but I don't care about that. We're just talking about this end. So, I'm going to put this here. That's a little better. I want to have a 12-inch overhang, but it's going to be 12 inches past the sheathing. There's going to be a gable end truss right here, because that gable end truss will also have sheathing, so the wall, the sheathing comes up and it goes over your gable end and it's all seamless and the siding just goes right up there. So I know I'm going to have a truss, a gable end truss here, and then 2 feet in, roughly, we're going to have our next one. Now, I'm going to mark 3 feet right here. Because what you do when you're cutting your plywood, you can get a 3-footer and a 5-footer out of one sheet. So you'll go through and cut 3s and 5s. And the 3-footer, usually I'll start with a 5-footer when I'm laying the plywood, just because it's bigger, gets you a little more room there, less room to screw up this way. But we're just trying to mark where our truss goes. So we know if our plywood has to go out 12 inches past, I come in here at 3 foot, I'm going to want to have a truss. So I'm going to go back 3/4 of an inch. probably making no sense whatsoever, but that's where I want my truss. So now I measure on, because I don't have, my sheathing is down here because we held it low. I can't hook on to sheathing, and I don't want to hold this over a 1/2 inch. I hook on here, 22 3/4. That's what's going to be to my first truss. Both sides, everything will be the same going through. After this, it's just going to be 2 4 6 8. One thing also to remember, now this is a 1/2 inch, this is actually 7/16, but you know, it's measures pretty dang close to a 1/2 inch. And you might have 3/4 inch sheathing. What if you did 1 inch foam? We did some jobs before where we had to do the sheathing on it and then go around with 1 inch foam around the whole thing, tape it. That was really a pain. But anyway, and you still want that 12 inch overhang. Your overhang doesn't get smaller, you get bigger with what you do with your plywood. But in this instance here, it ends up to be 22 3/4. So that explains this here. If I had guys working here and I'm down here and they say, Joe, what do I set the first truss at? I'm going to tell them 23 1/4. Because when I'm telling them a measurement, everything is from outside. So they know they have to go to the outside of the sheathing. But to figure it out when you're doing it this way, this is probably really complicating you. I know I'm going to be hooking my tape on the wood, so I'm going to do 22 3/4. But for them guys up there, outside, we're always measuring outside. So unless I say 22 3/4 from the wood, I will just yell 23 1/4, and they know what's outside of sheathing. Because I will always go through and figure this out before they're up there doing anything. And one thing to remember, there's you know, I've been going through the comments. I just put up part 4, I think. Anyway, there's a lot of great comments, and you know, every job people do things differently. And I've had the, you know, the opportunity to have a lot of people work for me, and I've worked with a lot of people through the years. And everybody, you know, in construction, you're lucky if you can get one to stay many, many years. Otherwise, you get some that come and some that go and try to go on their own. Some come back. But everybody has their own idea. When they come there, I always had the same saying at my job. There's only one way to do it, and that's the right way. And if you're on my job, the right way is my way. And I mean, if I have one guy doing something like this and then another guy doing it a different way, and they aren't both the same, my head's going to explode. So it's always, if you're on my job, you're doing it my way. And if I was on your job, I would do it your way, unless you said, hey, take the crew and do it. So if you hear other things about ways of doing it, might not be wrong, it's just not the way that I do it. And you really have to keep that mindset when you're doing the job, because at the end of the day, you are responsible for everything that happens on that job. I mean, if Bob over there screwed something up, well, you can fire him if you want or whatever, but you are the one responsible for it. You're the one that has to pay for the repair. So one thing that my dad told me when I was just starting, like when I was getting my own crew to lay out houses and stuff, and he said, don't be afraid to be an asshole to your guys. He said, because they're calling you one behind your back anyway. Might as well live up to the name. And you know, normally I'm pretty easy to work for. I'm easy until I'm not easy, I guess. If you're really screwing up, it's, you know, there comes a point where I've had enough. But that really does stand kind of true. If you can't, you know, I want you to do it this way, and if you're not going to do it this way, I'm going to yell at you for not doing it that way, because otherwise you're not in control of what's happening, and at the end of the day, you're responsible for it. So you really have to run your crew that way, or you're going to end up getting in trouble and losing money. Well, I'm going to get these trusses laid out, but I wanted to show you one more thing, and this isn't super critical, but something you need to think about. When we built those walls, you know, sometimes the wall butts in, sometimes the wall goes past. In this instance, we have one that goes past. So then I did the partition mark, which was right at 5.5. And then I told you to keep this plate back just a little bit so it doesn't hit. And then we went ahead and we put this plate on, but we also kept this 1 1/8 inch back so it doesn't hang over the wall, because then you're going to fight that later. If I go now to hook on and do my 22 3/4, there's an 1/8 inch difference here. I'm actually an 1/8 inch off, so I want to hook on here. Is that 1/8 inch going to make that big of a deal? Probably not at all. I mean, how many times do you say the saying on a framing crew? This isn't a piano, let's get it done. but you're still an 1/8 inch off. So anyway, if I hook on here and go, and usually with this one here, I'll do 22 3/4, then I will put a nail and hook on and just do 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 foot going down. I don't do the 22 3/4 and then stay under it again like I do with the 16s. Anyway, that's just an 1/8 inch right there that you need to think about, because what happens if you cut this and it was a 1/4 inch short or something? Or if you were stupid and didn't follow it and it's hanging over, everything's going to be off. When you do this too, you want to try to keep hooking onto that same nail that you put in until you run out of tape, because you know what it's like when you were a kid and then they'd put you in a circle and somebody would tell in your ear something, and by the time it got around that whole entire circle, it was a totally different story by the time it got to the end. If you keep hooking on to different numbers, there's a chance that you can get off a 1/16 or an 1/8 inch and going down the line, and pretty soon you're 3/4 of an inch off. If you could just hook on that same nail as long as possible and keep marking, you have less the chance of that happening. Well, this side is all laid out now. I'm just going to go do the exact same thing on the other side. And I did start on the back of this building, which normally you would think, okay, you laid everything out from the front on the walls. Why didn't I do that on the trusses? And that probably would have been the smarter thing to do, but this is a 32-foot building, so it's very close to being the same. It's a little bit off, but I have a porch going on to the front of this, which is going to screw everything up, because I have a gable end here that needs to be sheeted all the way up, and then the trusses. So I want to be able to start with 3s and 5s and just continue through, so I started it on the back side. When you're doing this, always double check and see, especially if you got 2 different guys laying this out. You got one on this wall, one on that wall, which is quite common. Make sure they pull back and check to make sure, because I've seen before where somebody might hook on and somehow they got 1.5 inches off or something, and then better to catch it now on layout versus later when the trusses are up and you're trying to figure out why everything seems a little bit off. Another thing I checked as I was going, you never want to have a, if possible, I mean there are some places where you can because you have no choice, but you don't want to truss right on top of your wall, because then again, if an electrician's coming through, what if the plumber has a plumbing vent pipe that has to go through that's going to go up into the rafters? If there's a truss over there, they can't get through it. So this one here, nothing hit on. This one here actually hits about 1/8 of an inch X this way, so we're fine. But you always check that out too. Same with down below when you were doing the floor. If there's a basement below it, you never want to joist right underneath the wall, because somebody's going to get pretty mad later on when they're trying to get through it and they're drilling into a truss or a joist. A lot of times if layout happens to be that way and it's a long enough span or whatever, we'll just push the bottom of the truss over, kind of bow it or whatever, just to get it out of the way, or just move the whole entire bottom over, you know, the 1.5 inches, whatever is needed, but then just keep your top on layout. The truss will be a little bit out of level, but if it's a big enough roof, like this is not a very big roof, this is only 22 feet, but when you're talking a 35-foot span and you've got a 12-12 truss, you're not going to miss that. It's probably not even going to be that close to level by the time you get to the top anyway, so nobody's going to notice. I've worked on several jobs in the past, you know, like when they bring your trusses out, they can only be so wide going down the road, even as a wide load. I don't know if it's 10 feet or whatever, but the trusses were so big that they come out like this. Like, here's this part, and then this part, and then this part. So we had the main truss, then we have a piggyback, which in that case you have to put a 2x4 every 2 feet going across here, and there's all kind of fastening crap that has to be done. And this little hangs down to hit this truss on the edges. And then, so we set all these, then we go back and we set all these, and some of these I've seen before that were 30 feet long. And then we have the piggyback on top here, same thing, more 2x4s, and then it comes up to the peak. So yeah, like I said, if you move this truss on the bottom over 1.5 inches, by the time you get up there, you're not going to notice it at all. One of the comments that I got was why I'm not using the forklift. I know it's called a telehandler, but I just call it the lift. Why I'm not using the lift to bring all the lumber up. And there's 2 reasons. One reason is I wanted to show people that you can build this without having all of that fancy machinery and stuff. You know, you can just do things by hand and it gets done. And the other reason is with the lift, I have one of the cylinders that runs the boom has a bad leak. The seal went out. So when I do use it, it's really leaking the hydraulic oil. I did talk to a guy that lives down here about 1 mile, and he can fix that. I have a couple things I want fixed on it, but he's at least a month out, and I talked to him last week, so we're still talking 3 more weeks till I can get it in there to get it fixed. We are going to use it to set the trusses up here, not the whole stack at one time, because the more weight that gets on that boom, the more oil comes out of that seal. So I'll put it up in a couple of pieces, walk them down. But you could have done this, and I've done it many times, with no lift at all. You can either, well, the 22-foot trusses, put one ladder in the middle, carry it over, and just run it up. Just push it up, boom, boom, over the top and stack them. Get 4 up there, pull them down, another 4, pull them down. If you have 2 guys, you get 2 ladders, run them up the ladder. And another way that you can do it that's really easy, if I could have come in here and just straightened the outside walls, didn't do any of the interior walls, bring the truss through this big opening that I have, or through a doorway, and then you like set that end up, and then you put this end up with the peak going down, so that, I mean, the peak would hang to about here. Real easy, you just get them all stacked, but you have to keep them, they can't, you have to kind of leave them spaced enough. Anyway, and the reason why is then you get on one end up there, and you put your hammer into the truss like this, right where it, like the bottom comes flat, and then this part comes up. You put your hammer right in there, and you just grab it, and you can flip that whole truss right up. And it's real easy. And then, you know, you nail it, which you put 2 nails in one side, a 16 penny, and then 1 in the other side. If it's not windy, that thing will stay. And you can just get down, go over here, and nail this side. Because I mean, after you get a few trusses up, then you start putting on the braces. But anyway, we do porches like that all the time, and I could have done this whole thing easily just doing it that way. Set those trusses, get them all braced, then come down here and do the interior walls. It's nice to have the interior walls though to walk on the way I'm going to do it, because I can walk on the center wall and everything stays nice. The trusses aren't bowing down as they're sitting across. But that's why I haven't used the lift that much. It needs some repair, and I just wanted to show people that, hey, you can do this without a lift. It's a little bit more work, but you can do it. 10:30 in the morning right now. I'm going to run in and see. I know we're doing oyster po' boys and homemade french fries for lunch. We tried to get oysters last weekend and could not find them. Walmart didn't have any. And they were sold out, so we found some at the Superior one. So we had shrimp po' boys last weekend. But I'm the one that does the french fries, so I'm going to go in there and see if she's starting to cook yet or not. Well, all the trusses are up there now. That wasn't too bad. It's easier than going up a ladder. Well, now that we have them up there, the first truss to go up is going to be one of the gable ends, and I always like to sheet the gable ends before I tip it up when I can, so you don't have to go up there on a ladder. It's especially nice when you're 30 feet in the air, you know, you don't have to try to get up there with the forklift, put a ladder on the forklift to get up there. So this one wouldn't have been bad either way, but these trusses are exactly 4 feet tall, and I'm going to want it to drop below the truss to cover up, because remember how we have our sheathing held down on the wall, so it'll cover up that gap. So I'll cut it exactly 48, drop it, and you also don't want the plywood, of course, sticking above the truss, so I always want it dropped. So when I did this, since it's a 412, it's up 4 feet, and then a 412 means it drops every 4 inches every 12 inches. So we have 4 times 8, which is 32, so I just started at 4 foot, dropped down 32 inches, and then I'll go ahead and cut this. We got the gable end sheeted and tipped up. And what I did on the outside of the house here, the sun doesn't blind you, I put that 2x4 going up. This way I can nail into it, and that'll hold me just fine since it's not that windy. Until I get 4 or 5 trusses on and I can get a brace going across the bottom and then at an angle going up, and at that time I'll level that outside truss. Right there I just ripped some of the scraps of plywood, and I'm just going to use that as a ribbon to tie them all together as I tip them up. And I'll start with this one, so you can see my arrow showing that's the start, and it's 22 3/4 to that line, which is the same layout that I have on the walls. Nail this end on the end of the gable end, and then get these 3 trusses in, and then when I level that first truss, all the other trusses will also level in. And then from there I just, 2 foot off for all the other ones. When I nail the trusses down to the wall, I have 2 nails on one side, 1 nail on the other. They go through the gusset, which is that metal plate right there, and then into that top plate, and I'm nailing them with 16-penny sinkers. In the center here, I came up, measured from against the plywood to the truss again, 22 3/4, and then 2 foot off that, and I've got 1 16-penny sinker in each side of the bottom member of the truss and into the top plate on that wall. And then of course on the outside wall it's the same 2 and 1 again. And only set your trusses on one side. Like over here I'm setting them flush with the outside plywood. Over on that side, you'd think as careful as we were, it would be sticking past a 1/2 inch, but it's not. It's only sticking past about 1/8. I don't care about that at all. All I care about is that my trusses are completely straight. This wall was real nice and straight, so you always, no matter what, you set them on one side the whole way down and you go with it. Now I'm going to bring these 2 2x4s up there. We're going to get these set and get that gable end leveled and all that nailed in, and the boards I'm going to put in there right now will stay there forever. They're going to be what holds everything nice and level, and if the wind's blowing against it out there, that's not going to go anywhere because of what we're going to put in there right now.
You can see what I did right there. That's holding everything together. And I made sure to go on the left side of the center of the truss so that this 2x4 didn't stack above that top plate, because if I have to come down here, which I probably do with cold air returns, I'm going to have to cut out that plate, and I didn't want to have to deal with that because I would have to redo all that. This has to stay. This is code right here. I'm just going to continue to set these trusses, turn the camera off for a little bit. House of Hair is playing right now, and I'm sick of shutting it off to do video clips. I'm just going to do some trusses. Well, I'm going to call it a day. All the trusses are up. Everything is nailed down. All the walls are nailed. Even these back walls, you make sure anywhere it goes over a cross wall that you nail it. So all of that's done. We did that bracing before. This bracing over here now is completely done. If you're ever doing this, you see that 2x4 right there hanging down below? Common mistake, the guys will let it drop down and hit on top of the truss, and then that corner is hanging into the room. Comes time for people to do sheetrock and they have to cut that off. They don't like that. So anyway, make sure you lift it up so it's at least above the bottom of the trusses. I have the bottom plate set here and the top plate, and I measured on that side it was 89 3/4 stud height, and over here it's 89 3/4 also. I've had enough of today. It's about 10 minutes after 7 and I'm going to call it. Come back out here tomorrow and get a little bit more done. Today I'm just concentrating on getting a few things wrapped up. One of them is this wall here in the kitchen, and this one, unlike the other ones where we built them on the deck and tipped it up, this one here I have to do one piece at a time, which they call balloon framing. You kind of think of balloon framing as when you're doing like a 2-story wall with real long studs and you have to do it one at a time, but this would fall into the same category. Just no way to build it and tip it, you know, it would hit that header. I want to get that up, kind of get the house, the whole perimeter kind of in. I can see what's going on. Today is also Sunday, so I try not to make quite as much noise, even though I really don't have any neighbors that are very close. It just makes me feel kind of guilty. Tomorrow I think I'm going to jump up here and do all of the plywood on the roof.
for this corner here, I ran out of the 7/16 4x8 sheets. So this is a cutout from one of the doors or whatever, and you can use scraps and you can seam it wherever. When I bought, not my first house, but my second house, the one that all three of my kids were born in, we lived there for like 15 years, and I built a triple car detached garage because it had no garage on it. And I saved wood like from doing the roofs and stuff, and I had all kinds of 2-foot by 4-foot pieces, 16-inch by 4-foot, and I sheeted that whole garage. It was a 3-stall. I went like this, and then it angled for the 3rd stall. I did the whole entire sheathing on the outside in scraps, which you can do, but you have to block all the seams. So we need to get a block in here, and it doesn't have to be fastened here and here. It has to be fastened sheathing to sheathing because the sheet has to be a whole sheet. So it can't move. Not that it would move anyway, but still they require that it be solid, and by putting a block in there, that makes it solid.
I just put in the inverted hangers that'll hold the 2 headers for the porch over the front door here, because this whole entire roof will actually come straight out to the left here, 6 more feet. I still had to put sheathing on that gable end though, because you have to have it separated, you know, outside to in. But anyway, I'm not looking forward to doing that. But it needs to be done if I want to get that whole entire roof plywooded, because the roof just continues right over on top of this. There's no drop or anything like that. Okay everyone, well thanks a lot for watching. 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. It's time to call it. Next time we'll be up on top. I will see you guys on the next video.